In this video, we're going to discuss lights. Now, not all light behaviors can be discussed in a single video, but I'm going to cover the basic ones, the ones that have been with us from the beginning, and they're used universally in all the different kinds of games, and we'll cover the more complex lights in different videos, one-off videos as they come up, but these are the basics. So the first one we'll cover is constant light. Now this actually is the default light behavior that you'll see on any light globe that you add to a scene. It's kind of the first one you interact with, and there's really not a whole lot to say about it. I mean, it's constant, right? There's no settings, it's just on. And so we'll cover all the settings here in a moment, but it's not much to it. It's always on. And it's actually maybe one of the more useful lights I find because there's not that many settings, but there's a lot of uses for it, right? So in my case, I've added lights to the street lights to kind of give the scene more visibility, but then also I've used the light here to draw attention to this door, right? Because I want the player to go into this door. And lights are often used in games to draw attention to things and to guide the player and say, hey player, come check this out. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and walk through this door and come inside out of the rain. We're in a dark warehouse. So we need to flip on the light. Luckily there's a light switch right here. And we click on the light and lo and behold, we have light. So we have a toggle light. And the toggle light just, turns it on and off, right? Pretty simple stuff. We're getting more and more complex as things go on. Alright, so now we're inside the warehouse, but I want to go outside this big door. So I'm going to turn this door on. And for safety reasons, when I do that, we have a little light that turns on. This is a rotating light, kind of letting us know that the door is open for safety purposes. Now, this could look better, I admit. I don't really have a lot of great assets to use, so it'd be better if it was like a red light, not a white light. But you get the idea. It rotates. That's the idea. We'll go over how to set that up here in a moment. And then I've got this scene outside. Now, this is the flicker light. So this could be used to indicate that a light is, having a fault, having some sort of distress, and it's just kind of flickering, so it's not constant. And I'm also using it here on this lit cigarette, so you can kind of see there's like a cigarette ashtray and some smoke rising out of the cigarette, and since the cigarette is lit, there's this tiny little glow, and you might think, well, I would use flame light for that, right? It's on fire, but not really, because flame light is the burn barrel there, and you can tell there's a big difference between the way the flame light moves, right, and the way that flicker moves. And for something very subtle like that, I went with the flicker. And then the last one we want to cover is the strobe light. Now, because the security camera has noticed my presence, it's turned on the alarm, and I'm getting the alarm signal turned on, so security's probably on their way to come check out why the door is open here in the rain at night. But just me, that'll be fine. So let me show you how all these individual lights work. All right, we'll start with our constant light. Like I said, short conversation, not much to it, but it's okay. So the first thing you need to know about lights is the light color. Actually, let's cover the colors. So these are all presets, right? These are not the only light colors you can have. They're just convenient. There's something to start with, and I use them quite a bit. So you can actually use different colors, right? So you can change the light color here and select whatever shade you want. So you can do a little green shade or blue shade or whatever you want. You can dial in like specific RGB values or hexadecimal values, whatever you need. So you don't have to stick with the presets. The presets are just convenient. Then you have the light distance, which is just how far from the light source is that light going to shine. 100, I think, is the default. I went a little bit higher just because I wanted to kind of really draw your attention to that space. But that's all very uniform across all different lights. The behavior itself has no actual parameters to it. You can, it just says the light stays on all the time. It's a constant light. It's very simple. And the only other thing about lights is whether or not it should cast shadows. I would expect all lights to cast shadows, but you don't have to. It kind of depends on what you're doing. So for instance, the cigarette light, maybe we don't want that to cast shadows because it's so small and it's so low to the, to the scene that it just wouldn't necessarily cast any meaningful shadows. All right, so let's step inside and we'll look next to the toggle light. All of these lights that you see up here, there's 6 of them, are all toggle lights. Now I could have used maybe 1 or 2 of these globes instead and spread them out a little bit and used fewer globes to light the entire scene, and that would have been okay too. And sometimes that's what you want to do depending on the scene and the resources that you're using. Remember that each one of these light globes is using memory, it's using resources, and so that may not be what you want to do, especially in a big room where those individual point lights are not going to be really that necessary. In my case, I chose to go with the 6 individual lights because I wanted the shadows the way they are here. I wanted it to be clear that these boxes were kind of masking some of the light coming from these 2 lights up above, things like that. So that was a deliberate choice, but you don't always want to do that. Sometimes one light in this room might be enough. You really just want it to light up the entire room all at once. So pick your poisons there. Same light distance, same light color, same shadows, all those are the same. The only difference now is you have the option of whether or not the light should start in the on position. So in my case, I wanted the light to be off to begin with so that I could flip the switch and that would turn on all the lights. It would toggle the lights. And the way we do that, of course, is with the logic links. So I've got a logic link to each one of those globes. Now, each one of those is toggling the other object. And that way, when I turn off the light switch, all the lights toggle back off again. Now, I do actually have a toggle light here, which is red, and that was really just to give it more glow. So to try to make it more like a red light. It doesn't really work. I did the best I could, forgive me. So the light that we are showcasing in this case is the rotate light. Now, in order for a rotate light to work, it needs to be a spotlight. It's not going to work with a globe light. You need a spotlight. So make sure you convert it to one of those spotlight types. Then you can use rotate light. Now you have a few more options here. You have the speed of the rotation, and you can choose whether you want it to rotate clockwise or tick this box for anti-clockwise. And then whether or not the light should start on to begin with or be off to begin with and have to be toggled on. So it does have kind of that toggling effect. When I open the door, when I pull the switch, it opened the door up, but then it also caused the light to turn on and it caused the light to start rotating around. Okay, and then we come back out here. Now, I think it'll be easier to demonstrate flicker with this one rather than the cigarette. So, but they're the same basically. It's just a different color. Let's see here again, skipping over light distance and light shadow and all that stuff because that's all the same and all very uniform. We have flicker light. The flicker light is just flickering it on a cadence, right? So basically what's called is faults. So if you imagine you have a faulty light, how many faults does it have? How flickery is it? How fast is it flickering? The higher the number, the more faults, the higher the flicker rate. Try not to give anybody a stroke or a epileptic seizure with your lighting effects. Keep that to a minimum, I think, just to get the point across. That's all you need. And then in my case, I wanted that light to be on all the time because I didn't really have a switch. I didn't have a reason to turn this light on. This is an outdoor light, should be on all the time, but it's having some distress. So that's why the tick box is ticked there. But like I said, you can use these lights in a lot of different ways. And that's kind of why I set up the cigarette so that you could see that it's versatile. You just have to reimagine what that flickering could look like if you shrunk it down a little bit. So like on this globe, one of the things that I did, oops, that's the particle. Get a hold of that globe there. Still a particle, you know what? Move you out of the way. I brought the light distance down way small, and that made it kind of more local to the end of the cigarette. And of course, change the lighting color. Then we have the flame light. Now, I've used this in the past in a lot of different scenes. Pretty simple. You pick some sort of color that goes well with a fire. It doesn't have to be orange, kind of depends on the intensity of the fire, and then you just pick the intensity, right? So you have this slider here, which is how bright is that light. And remember that light is not constant, it's moving, right? And so the intensity of that light at its peak is what you're really focused on, right? Because the move amount is going to tell you how much is that wavering. So imagine this scene. Think about this scene for a second. We're outside, it's raining, so there's movement in the air, right? But it's also under an awning. So it's not going to have a ton of movement, but it had some movement to it. So a 3 was all I needed to get the effect that I wanted. I think it looked pretty good. Maybe it could be a little better, but you get the point. It doesn't take a lot to get the effect that you need. We already kind of understand that the tick box for light on just means that it should be on to begin with. I think if you were lighting something on fire that wasn't on fire to begin with, and then it got lit on fire, then maybe you'd start it with it off and then somehow trigger it to be on later. You do that. And then the glow interval. So if you'll recall, the when it would kind of come in and come out, that's the glow, right? So it would kind of almost expand or rise up and then fall back down. That's the glow interval. That's a really kind of a number that's hard to describe, but just dial it in, play around with it until you get the effect that you feel looks right to you. And that's probably the right number. And then the last one is strobe. Now, I really had a hard time with this one only because I was trying to figure out what am I going to do with strobe? You know, I've got all these other lights. They all kind of make sense. What am I going to do with strobe? How am I going to incorporate a strobe light in this scene? So I kind of painted myself into a corner a little bit, but then I came up with this idea of having a security camera. And if the security camera saw me coming out of the door at night like that, maybe it triggers the alarm. That's one possible use for the strobe light. Let's see here. And the settings for this one, we have the minimum range and the maximum range. So remember, this is strobing. It's coming on and off, on and off, on and off. And the range has to do with the amount of light being projected at peak and at trough, right? So the higher the difference, the delta between these two numbers, the bigger the effect is going to be. And I kept dialing it back and dialing it back because this is a very small light, so I didn't want it to be this big, bright, dramatic thing. Just wanted to kind of look like an alarm. So I kept dialing that back, and then I had the speed. So once I had the size of it kind of dialed in, I had to figure out, okay, what speed do I want it to flash in, that kind of strobe effect to happen. And I just kept pulling it back and pulling it back until it felt right. It's probably going to be a number somewhere between the max and the minimum, but maybe not. It just depends on your use case. And then, of course, we already talked about light on. It's just we wanted that light immediately. Now, theoretically, I could have been a little more fancy with this. I could have had this camera rotating, and when it came around and saw me, then it triggered that light to come on. But I didn't want to try to rush to look at it because that would have happened very fast. So I just went with it being on to begin with. But that's it. Those are the basic light behaviors. Like I said, there are many other kinds of light behaviors out there, but those are usually a little more complex. And I didn't want to try to pack too much into one video. So I want to just cover the basics of light. Now, if you want to learn more about lighting, this isn't really a tutorial on lighting or the concepts that go into lighting, but I do have an article on my new website that does kind of touch on some of the uses for lights and the techniques for lighting effects. This is a whole area of expertise that I mean, we could probably spend hours talking about and not cover everything. And I am certainly no expert when it comes to lighting effects. There's just so much to cover. It's as big a topic as audio. It's as big a topic as art. It's huge. And so I would really encourage you to spend a lot of time understanding lighting because it speaks to so many aspects of gaming and how games are designed to help the player understand the environment that they're in. So by all means, take a look at that article, read up on lighting effects, and I think you'll learn a lot. But that's it. If you enjoyed the video or if you learned anything new, please be sure to click the like button down below. It helps me out a lot. If you're new here or if you just haven't subscribed yet, would love to have you stick around. And lastly, if you'd like a notification for whenever a new video is posted, just click the bell icon and that'll let you know when a new video is ready. Thanks so much for watching all the way through. I always appreciate that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. Hey, don't forget, there's written documentation on every behavior, even the ones I haven't covered yet in video format, on my website at www.bloodmooninteractive.com. Be sure to check that out. And if you'd like to learn more, maybe check this video out next.